Chapter 7 The Baal and Astarte Mythos. Whether or not King Solomon ever studied and practiced the art of ceremonial magic is not a crucial question. Of greater importance are the philosophical psychological principles behind the legend of the monarch Magus who bound the 72 rebellious spirits in the vessel of brass. The multi-level implications of this Arabian folk tale, with its biblical origins, which was a major operative cosmology behind medieval ceremonial magic before the rise, or descent, of the perverted Faustian school should be fascinating to Jungian and even Freudian psychologists. From a Kabbalistic standpoint, the 72 spirits of the traditional Goetia are a significant corollary to the 72 letters of the extended name of God, the Shema Mefresh, from which the names of 72 angels can be derived, implying an inseparable duality of good and evil throughout the entire celestial infernal pantheon. Considering this in light of the micro-macrocosm dogma, we are presented with the concept of 72 greater and lesser bipolar archetypes functioning in the collective and personal unconscious. The brass vessel, aside from its obvious yoni symbolism, then represents the receptacle of the controlled and organized psyche. The rebellious spirits are summoned to appear by the power of Tetragrammaton, the ultimate cathexis, required to render service in accordance with their particular capabilities and then consigned to bondage in the brass vessel where they can cause no harm and from whence they can be readily called upon when needed. The psychotherapeutic analogy in the above is inescapable. We will discuss the philosophical symbolism of the triangle of art wherein such entities are commanded to appear in the documentary appendix. This then is the crux of the Solomonic system of magic. Pride, passion, greed and hatred cannot be divorced from their intrinsic counterparts, humility, purity, charity and love. They can only be organized and controlled as essential factors of the balanced personality. A sophisticated internalized concept that seems paradoxical with the popular image of the robed and hooded demonologist intoning his infernal conjurations. But why did the Arab doctors attribute this system to Solomon, and why do we, the foremost modem practitioners of it, call ourselves the Order of Temple Astarte? The answer to both questions can be found in the Bible. In 1 Kings, chapter 11, we read that Solomon followed Ashtoreth, the goddess Astarte, the abomination of the Sidonians. If we put the biblical account in a broader perspective, we realize that the patriarchal Levite sect of Yahweh was in constant, bitter conflict with the Baal Astarte cult of Canaan. Now it should be understood that the religion of Moses was a sect derived from the same mythos as its rival. Abraham, a Babylonian of Ur, had been blessed by Melchizedek the Canaanite king of Jerusalem and a priest of El, the Most High God. Genesis, chapter 14, this same El was the father of Baal and 81 Astarte. In Babylon El was called and was the father of Ishtar. Space does not permit us speculation on all the factors that aided the growth of the austere religion of Yahweh, but the hard, nomadic, ethnocentric life of the Hebrews was certainly one of the foremost. When this wandering branch of the Amorite people returned home to Canaan, they began the transition from pastoral tribesmen to agriculturalists and urbanites. Before the time of Saul and David, the religious battle lines were drawn. Joshua's attempted genocide of the Canaanites had not been successful and they still abounded in the land. The new farmers were naturally attracted to the nature-oriented intensification rituals of Baal, and their newly urbanized brethren were fascinated with the sensual glamour of Astarte's Saturnalian rites. It was probably at this point that the first puritanical blue laws of Orthodox Judaism appeared. During the Empire of Solomon, the socio-economic transition was complete, but the religious conflict had not resulted in a synthesis. Instead, we look back on two spiritually unbalanced cults fighting for supremacy. The transvestite priest of Astarte finding final exaltation in publicly castrating himself is hardly more odious than the Levite priest demanding a young woman be stoned to death for adultery or exacting a ruinous judgment from a poor farmer struggling to save his precious harvest by working on the Sabbath. Was Solomon attempting, by his Catholic example, to bring about a mellow fusion of these separate cults of El's progeny into a pansemitic polymorphous monotheism similar to the Hindu religion of India? He may well have built the magnificent temple at Jerusalem not only for the Levite Yahweh but for the universal overgood of all the Semites. 2. Why else would Hiram of Tyre, a pagan Phoenician, as had been Melchizedek, rejoice and say blessed be the Lord before assisting Solomon so readily? Lst Kings, chap. 5. Why is Solomon's greatest literary work, the Song of Solomon, so pregnant with the symbols of the goddess, and why did he construct conspicuous temples to her? Even the Levites conceded to the wisdom of Solomon, but if the above conjecture is true, they hardly understood 82 how wise he really was. For in the celestial marriage of Baal and Astarte, ritually enacted by priest and priestess, we see a direct analogy to the Shiva-Shakti congregs of the Tantric adepts, a magical formula of considerable power even in this faithless modern age. See chapter 10. How much more awesome it must have been in times when the sanctified celebrants and their congregation believed utterly in the truth of divine possession? One need only compare the great rite and its full ancient significance to the transformation miracle of the Pauline Mass, an indirect and passive assumption of God form, to realize why the art of magic has been feared and suppressed for so many centuries in the West. A solar cult that castrates its god and transforms his bride into a virgin mother cannot compete magically with a virile and fertile 501 Terra Mythos. Even though the Paulians adapted pagan festivals, embrace anthropomorphism and deified a vast pantheon of saints, their system has no direct, creative link with the deepest and most basic forces that energize humans and nature. Like the Levites, theirs is a religion of thou shalt not, and high on the list of thou shalt nots is the practice of magic. 83 We should perhaps digress to caution the casual reader against assuming from the above that the Ordo Templi Astartes is anti-Christian. We have the deepest respect for the teachings of the Master Jesus, and we are only critical of Paul's interpretation of them. The knowledgeable may choose to renounce Jesus as a creation of Paul, but the wise do not. Not only would such a renunciation be injurious to the personal egregore, it is historically unjustified. Jesus never claimed he was God and should not be blamed for the acts of those who posthumously deify him. A study of elementary Kabbalah will quickly resolve any difficulties in understanding this Rosicrucian view and lead the student to a full grasp of the significance of what the Master did say, I am the Son of Man. Further study and meditation may even lead to a revelation of the link between Jesus and Melchizedek. But to return to our subject. A convincing argument for the actual existence of a Solomonic proto-magical tradition such as we have described above, can be found in the Song of Solomon itself, wherein the mysterious Shulamite thrice declares, I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, stir not up nor awake my love, until he please. This sum may well be a hymn to the Queen of Heaven. Perhaps it is the culture memory of that magical religion Solomon tried to create that comes down to us in the ancient systems of thaumaturgy and theurgy the Arabians attributed to him? The essential polymorphism of magic with its rich pantheon of Phoenician, Babylonian and Egyptian entities as personalized male and female aspects of the Tetragrammaton, an all-pervading, transsexual life force, more lonely in its impersonal harmony, is a far more hellish conception than the paternal and patriarchal God of Moses. It might be considered a cosmic joke that the great El survived only as one of the many names attributed to his nomadic stepson, and that his daughter, the fair Astarte, was transformed into Ashtaroth, a male demon with bad breath. In the words of Khayyam, out of context, many a cup of this forbidden wine will drown the memory of that insolence. And Solomon's magic is indeed a forbidden wine. The Judeo-Pauline equation sex equals evil equals sex was inculcated in 84 scripture not from the dread of a distant hell. The Hebrews did not even have a concept of hell, but from fear of the cult of Astarte and the lure of its courtesans. As Wilhelm Reich theorized and the later Soviet social experiments proved, the power of authoritarianism depends largely on its ability to channel the sexual drives of its subjects. The ancient pagan establishment maintained such control by sanctifying the sex act with its official priestesses, while the Hebrews, later the Paulians and finally the communists decided to make a sin out of it. Needless to say, both extremes are insults to freedom and dignity. As a corollary to this sexual negation, the Hebrew, and later Muslim, Prohibition against graven images, especially anthropomorphic ones, was not imposed from any desire to promote a concept of pure monotheism, as is usually supposed, but rather to restrict the practice of magic which depends on such visual links to function effectively. As a pragmatic compromise, the Paulians dangled the anthropomorphic carrots of angelic and saintly icons before their pagan converts for this dubious reason. The so-called Christian Kabbalah was more magical than its non-visual Hebrew antecedent, explaining its evolution into the Neo-Solomonic system we practice today. Romantically, we may speculate that this ancient religion of Solomon's may well have evolved in a manner that the age-old monarch intended. If he was the first magus, he may have envisioned a secret tradition, sought only by the wise, which would perpetuate the truth he had discovered, that the spirit of divine providence within us has many faces, good and evil, male and female, all reflected in the multifaceted jewel of the microcosm, while in the macrocosm they are all one. Perhaps he even understood the arcanum of the celestial marriage with its ultimate formula, in your temple you are one with the gods,